All right, so we're going to begin a new chapter here, Chapter 8, Southwest Asia. I will often refer to this as the Middle East, even though Southwest Asia is probably a little bit more appropriate of a term. Middle East is kind of more of a certain section of Southwest Asia. So here's a map. Some of this area of land we should be fairly familiar with. Back whenever I was in junior high, high school, a lot of these areas were in the news a lot, particularly because whenever I was a kid, the Persian Gulf War was going on against Iraq. So we'll talk about Saddam Hussein and his dictatorship and how he, invaded the country of Kuwait, and we'll just talk about a lot of that detail. So maybe you know some people that were soldiers that served during that time, family members. So maybe you've heard of that region. Afghanistan is over here, which more recently, in history, that's kind of where we've had some terrorism and there's been a war on terror that's been fought in Afghanistan. The attack on 9/11 was connected with that. But I think we kind of have a lot of misunderstandings about the Middle East. Just because it's probably an area we don't talk about a whole lot, even though it has been in the news. So we'll talk about Islam in this section, but this first section here really just deals with the physical geography, which has a huge impact on why this area is the way it is. So there's 15 countries in Southwest Asia, and they're all very similar in a lot of ways. You're going to see religion similarities and language similarities, more so than maybe we've seen up to this point. There is definitely a lot of diversity a lot more diversity, I would say, in the eastern part of Asia. Western here, Arabic is going to be the major language spoken. Islam is one of the major religions practiced. There is Christianity and Judaism, but definitely Islam has kind of its root in this area. So there's just a lot of similarities between these countries, even though, there may be some other languages that are spoken. There's other things that separate them and make them more unique, political structures or whatever. Here you can see kind of the physical layout of the map. There are mountains and plateaus. We're going to kind of skip past some of this. The Hindu Kush mountain range is an important one that runs through Afghanistan. And then the Khyber Pass, which I believe that's what this is a picture of. So mountain passes are really important because they allow people to go through the mountain instead of going around them. If you've ever traveled anywhere where there are mountains, it definitely takes a lot longer to go around. So mountains form a natural barrier, and that keep out people from invading, but it also these passageways allows people to invade, but it also allows a way to trade, so there's a passage between them. So the Khyber Pass that's located here in the Hindu Kush range is a very important one, and it has been for thousands of years. This just talks about other structures that exist, plateaus. The Arabian Peninsula is this massive section right down here. This is mainly Saudi Arabia is in this area, and it has a lot to do with kind of an influence on the rest of Southwest Asia. But the waterways around Southwest Asia are very important as well. We have a lot of big ones, and I may go back to the map here in just a second. So there's the Mediterranean Sea, there's the Black Sea, and then there is the Red Sea. And so if we go back to one of these early maps, you can see the Red Sea here. And that's going to be an important one because the Suez Canal, which was a man-made canal, was put in, and it gives access to the Mediterranean Sea. That may not seem like that big of a deal, but this is how you access Europe. So you now can go through that canal, and you're going to see a slide that talks about that in a moment. So that's important. And then the Arabian Sea down here gives access, to basically the rest of the world via the ocean. So those three waterways are really important, but they're not the only ones. So the Red Sea, the Black Sea, and the Mediterranean Sea are kind of all really important, and the Persian Gulf. This just kind of talks about some of the countries that are where they're located around, whether on the Arabian Peninsula or they're border of the Mediterranean Sea. Talked about Iran being landlocked. So the Dead Sea is also interesting more than anything, and it is the lowest point on Earth at 1,300 feet below sea level. And it's incredibly saltier, 9.6 times that of the ocean. And I don't really want to show all this video, and it probably won't work very well when I'm doing it in here, but there's one point in this video where it shows a lady in the water, and I maybe passed that. Here it is, yeah. So check this out. So if you notice those people, they're like not trying to stay afloat at all. So when the sea is that salty, your body is naturally kind of buoyant. This is an interesting video to watch. It talks about the different types of ways that salt forms, like almost like they call them diamonds and pearls. So there's so much salt in the water that it actually kind of collects in the water, causes it to kind of take shape into pearls or diamonds. I have no idea if they have value to them or not. I talked about people using mud. The mud is considered to have a lot of healing properties. So the Dead Sea, more than anything, more being an important waterway, is kind of mainly for tourism. It gets its name, the Dead Sea, because it is so salty that nothing lives in that. There are no fish in the water or other aquatic life. There are probably some microorganisms that can survive in salty climate or salty water, but not any fish. So kind of interesting. So the Dead Sea, kind of really fascinating thing. This is also really important, especially as we get into sections 2 and 3. Mainly in section 2, we will talk about these two rivers, and they mainly are kind of in modern day Iraq, and they are the Tigris and the Euphrates. Now, you look at that word, it may not actually try to pronounce it that way, but that is how you say it, Euphrates. So Tigris, Euphrates. And they together create a part of an area called Mesopotamia. And so Mesopotamia is a Greek word that means the land between the rivers. And this land between them is extremely fertile, and it floods. And this is kind of one of the other major areas. There's like 4 main areas that we've talked about where the first humans lived. So we've already talked about the Indus River Valley, and we've talked about ancient China. And so we have 2 left to cover, and Mesopotamia is one of those. The other one's going to be Egypt, which will come about in chapter 9. So Mesopotamia, some of the first people that lived in this region came settled in this area. So the first civilization. So that the waterways, the rivers, the flooding is extremely important. There are a lot of deserts in this area. That's probably the climate type that is most common in this region. One of the major places is called the Rub al Khali, and you can't see that very well, but it says this is the largest sand sea in the world. So this is a picture of it here. It's just, I think they've kind of filmed a lot of movies out here, just because it's just tons of sand, which makes for an interesting background for a movie or whatever. So that'll come up on the last slide as we review. As I already said, very arid, dry climate. Some places, there's really not anything that can live there. There are a group called the Bedouin that may come up in another section in this chapter, but they are nomadic people that migrate throughout the desert and live there. But like most people don't live because the climate is so harsh. And the Bedouin would be after these oases, which is an area where aquifers, areas of water underneath the ground, and they rise up, and so that water is constantly there. So it makes a place where they can bring their animals to survive. So this is kind of a showing how an aquifer and an oasis is formed. This just shows the climate type, and you can see the yellow is representing arid climate. So almost all of the Arabian Peninsula, it has arid climate, and there's some arid climate over here as well. There's a few other different types of Mediterranean climate as you get up around the Mediterranean Sea. but most of it is very arid and dry. This right here is most likely a oasis, I believe. Looks really actually pretty with the really blue water there. It's very hot, obviously, and actually can get really cold at night too. I think a lot of people don't understand that about deserts, but because there is not a lot of cloud cover, the temperature fluctuates a lot. So it says here, temperature can rise to be 129 degrees, but it may be like 40 degrees at night. I don't think we often think of deserts as cold. We do have cold deserts that we've talked about before, but because of the lack of cloud cover, the temperatures can fluctuate and change greatly in the desert. So just an incredibly harsh place to live. This just again kind of talks about other climate. Resources are important. So water is obviously an extremely scarce resource if you live in a desert. So it has had a huge impact on how people live in this area. And that's what this kind of slide kind of deals with here. But the most profitable resource is oil and natural gas. And it's just because there is so much of it. If you think of a desert not having a lot, it doesn't have a lot of trees. It doesn't have, a lot of other things that can support life. But oil and natural gas in these areas have made, some of these places extremely wealthy. One of the areas we'll talk about is the United Arab Emirates, which is like one of the wealthiest places in the world. That's where it has the largest building in the world. Maybe you saw the fireworks show on New Year's Eve that they put out, which is amazing. It's like fireworks coming out of the side of the building. It's super impressive. I watched it the last 2 years. So a lot of that wealth in that area comes from oil. And you might just say, well, there's other industries besides oil. And there are. But oil is just a component of so many different things. Maybe you didn't know this, but like oil is a component. Petroleum is in plastics. So think about all the plastics that are in the world. It's not just gasoline and things like that. This says bicycle tires, clothing, fibers, lots of things can be made from petroleum. So the world's largest known reserves of petroleum are in Southwest Asia. And some of these countries just have more of it than others. Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, United Arab Emirates hold more than half of the world's known oil. And I think the next slide shows this really well. It's not this slide. This shows, again, kind of natural resources. But look at this. So the rest of the world has not even a majority, but Southwest Asia has over 50% of the oil reserves. And the United States for many years has been dependent on that oil, and which means kind of Southwest Asia can charge the price that they want. And I think in recent years, the United States has tried to reduce our dependence on foreign oil. Opening up our own reserves of oil in places like Alaska has cut down on that. So this is a video that kind of deals with this. You'll see around the around the Persian Gulf, there will be many of these, vessels that carry that oil, tankers that are carrying oil to other countries so that it can be, refined and made into gasoline and other products. There are other resources that exist in this area, but mainly oil is huge business. So just as a recap, and as I was going through, I realized that there was one fact that I didn't put on there. So I'll try to go through these 9, and then I'll show you where the 10th one is. So I think we can go through these fairly quickly, but I want you to write them down. Remember, I'm not having you take notes the traditional way, but writing these 10 things down are kind of like the key things. And really what I do to do this is I kind of go through the test, and I kind of pick out, these are the key things. These things are going to be on your test. I mean, you can just kind of guarantee that. So water is a scarce resource, and it has had a huge impact on Southwest Asia. The Ruba Kali is the world's largest sand sea. So that picture I showed you with all the sand. Oil and natural gas are found in huge abundance in Southwest Asia. The climate is mainly arid desert. Mesopotamia is an important area that will come up in section 2 as we talk about the first people that lived in this region, and that is the land between the rivers. That's what it's known as in Greek. The Suez Canal has contributed greatly to the Red Sea becoming one of the world's busiest waterways. So it was this man-made canal that allows you to get from the Red Sea, which connects also to the Persian Gulf and the rest of the ocean, to the Mediterranean Sea, which gets you to a good portion of Europe. So really important waterway. The Khyber Pass is an important opening in the Hindu Kush range. Then I should say is an opening in the Hindu Kush. That's a misprint there. That has served as a trade route. The Bedouins are the nomadic people that live in the deserts of Southwest Asia, and they herd camels and sheep and horses. And then the last one there, Southwest Asia, takes its physical shape mainly from the bodies of water that surround it: the Persian Gulf, the Red Sea, the Mediterranean Sea, the Black Sea. Those have had a huge impact, along with the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers. So if you need to pause this video to write these key 9 things down, do that. And then I'm going to go back here now to the other thing that I know appears on the test, and I forgot to include it. I got to find which slide it was on. And that is where it talks about alluvial plains, which I believe, yeah, here it is. Alluvial plains came up in our last chapter as well. So it says in the lower courses, they flow parallel to each other through an alluvial plain or a plain created by sediment deposited during floods. So just knowing that an alluvial plain is a plain created by sediment deposited during floods, that's kind of really key. Because these rivers do flood all the time. So I will try to move that over here, and I'm going to, so it's actually in the 10 things are listed there in the notes that I upload. So that will do it for this video. Thanks for watching.